I want to point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I want to hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another episode. Is this an episode?
I think
It's an episode of Energy Week, in which we review the week's news relating to energy, which I pick up spending probably about 3 hours every day reviewing news for my blog, geoharvey.wordpress.com, in the early morning. And I want to mention I also write for Green Energy Times, and so I've got all of this material that I just thought would be nice to share with people. I am George Harvey, and this is Tom Fennell.
Oh.
And we're ready to go.
I want to just interject something here. Some people have told me that sometimes I'm on here looking like I'm lost. And they're wondering, why am I here? And
it's because I'm lost and you're the only one who knows what to do.
Well, George does the heavy lifting here. He does the research, and he does thousands of hours of research.
Every day.
Every day. My function basically here is I'm engineering the show. I'm sitting around here playing with these mice here, bringing up the different pictures.
More mice than most people have to deal with.
So when I want you to look at George, I pick up George. If I want you to look at me, I pick up me. And sometimes I am lost. But I just wanted to explain what's going on.
This is a place where what you see is what you get. Okay, should we get into the news?
Yeah, you're on
right.
now. Here you are.
Yeah, our first news item from the 21st of March, which was, I guess, last Friday, but it might have been last Thursday. I don't know. An NRC official said in a comment that Entergy staff did not follow proper procedures when they, quote, detonated a suspicious item, end quote, that resembled a pipe bomb inside the nuclear power plant compound.
You know,
What do we make of this?
I read about this in the newspaper.
It was in the Reformer. That's where I got that.
What the heck is going on here? Now, somebody got this story wrong. They had to, but what it said in the paper was they put some duct tape on it and a piece of string, and pulled the string in an attempt to detonate the bomb. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well,
duct tape, string,
I don't know.
bombs. No, something happened that they're not really telling us. I don't think it was anything serious. I think it was something stupid. And they said, originally they said it was a pipe capped on both ends, which is very suspicious.
It's suspicious, yeah.
And then they said, no, it was somebody's sump pump.
How did a sump pump get on the compound?
So, that being said, the security in the electrical industry needs an awful lot of help. If we had some serious terrorists out there, they could do a job.
We will get into that later.
Yeah, we will.
I didn't actually include that item, but it's going to be talked about when we get to that other one.
It's very vulnerable.
It's very vulnerable, and not just to terrorists. So that's the news for the 21st. 22nd, a study published in the journal Energy and Environmental Science concludes that it takes more work, to make a combination of solar and storage sustainable than it takes to do the same with a combination of wind power and storage. And I believe what this is talking about is the fact that wind power is almost always going at a reduced level of output from its nameplate capacity, but solar goes at full power very often. In a sunny day, it's just going to go at full power. At night, it doesn't go. So the result of that is that solar has these deep swings.
That's part of it, but I read the article.
Okay.
And I tried to get my head around the math.
Okay.
And I came to the conclusion that I can't get my head around the math. Except enough to say it's believable.
Yeah.
But part of what's going on is the actual energy cost of producing these things from ground zero.
Okay.
And right now, the the total energy cost of producing solar,
Solar is higher.
than
Yeah.
it is.
Although I think that'll change.
It's definitely changing
Yeah.
very rapidly.
Well, actually, wind power is going down. in
They're
price,
both
too.
going down.
But
solar's going down faster because it's higher.
We said
right
that. We practiced that. Okay. There was an opinion piece that I just thought was interesting. Could a 500 house? Oh dear, 500 pound. What was it?
Gorilla?
No. What weighs 500 pounds, has 4 wings, 4 legs, and is yellow?
I'll bite.
Two 250-pound canaries.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is what went through my mind when I read 500. Could a 500 house, pardon me, ladies and gentlemen, that was a terrible joke, I should never have said it, community go off grid? That's the name of the article. And the point of this, let me finish reading this. The shift away from centralized to standalone community power solutions could be quick and dramatic, with most Australian regional towns able to function economically off-grid as soon as 2020. And that was in Renew Economy. And what they're talking about now, and I'm just seeing this over and over and over again in the news, is it's getting to be so cheap to get battery backup that we're getting to a point where in a couple of years it's going to be cheaper for a normal household, a town, a whatever, to have solar power and battery backup than it is to buy grid power.
It won't make sense to buy grid power anymore.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, and so, a new paradigm is forming right before our eyes. Sorry about that canary thing.
I don't have any graphics on that story, but I do.
You don't have any graphics on canaries either.
No, but I can get that. Maybe 500 pounders I can't. But,
Okay, 23rd. 2 weeks ago, it looked like a record winter was over and a threatened shortfall in natural gas inventories had been avoided. Now the key question is whether this can be replaced, that is, the inventory can be replaced, in time for the next heating season or the ones after that. And my understanding is that the issue is that if we have a hot summer, natural gas inventories will be low going into the fall. And these inventories are built up over an annual cycle.
Yeah.
We've got a huge amount of storage for natural gas. They're using huge caverns in salt domes that come from mining salt. And they're pumping natural gas into these things, which, I'm sorry, I don't think any of this is a good idea.
yeah, I got a graphic up for this one. This came from that article.
Oh, did it?
That's Virginia.
Yeah.
That picture there is Virginia this winter.
Well, the natural gas inventory in the middle of March, they were talking about the possibility of running out of natural gas by the end of March this year. One cold snap away, and we're in trouble. Now they're saying if we have a hot summer followed by a cold winter next year, we're going to
We could run out of gas.
And if that happens, it's going to be dreadful, really, because it means that there's going to be choices made about who's going to get what gas is available.
Yeah.
And
the price isn't going to be the issue.
That's right. And most people don't realize that this is happening because the media is not really covering it. Anyway, next item, same day. That, by the way, that previous one came from Resilience, and this one comes from the Business Recorder. The government of Pakistan is in the process of implementing around 29 different wind projects as per a plan to enhance power production in the country. 2 projects with a capacity of 106.4 megawatts are already operating. On the 24th, California has set new records on solar energy production on March 8th, March 14th, March 15th, and March 16th. The grid operator has concluded it has to change its protocol for announcing record performance in solar power. So instead of announcing a new record being set on 50 megawatt increments, they're going to 500.
Yeah, I got a picture on that.
Oh my gosh!
If you want to take a look at it, it's
what is that big orange thing in the middle?
solar PV.
Wow!
And the very top is solar thermal. Now this is California.
Yeah.
But you can see right in the middle of the day, they're getting a lot of production.
And this is something that's very important because that solar power is coming online at precisely the time demand is
They need it
highest.
most.
Yeah. It's
And
a really
that blue
handy
thing on the right there is wind, which comes on mostly in California, comes on at night.
At night, yeah. Interesting how that's working. ExxonMobil will publicize the risks that stricter carbon emissions rules and limits will have on its business. In doing so, the largest publicly traded international oil and gas corporation in the
I
world
got that one too.
became the first such company to do this. There's been a group of stockholders that have been trying to get them to do this for years.
That's what's interesting about this story. The
Yeah.
stockholders made them do it.
Well, the stockholders didn't vote this, though. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe this was one of those things that came out of Ceres.
I got it up
they're
here.
changed to they're moving stockholders, big stockholders, to demand this.
I had the names of the stockholders groups. There was two of them, two major stockholders groups. But what they basically did, it says it seems like a huge deal for several reasons. The oil major, that's Exxon, is publicly acknowledging, publicly for the first time, the potential impact of carbon emissions limits on its business model. We're talking stranded costs here, or stranded.
Yep.
And revealing how it assesses the risk of stranded assets from climate change. And it did so at the bequest or behest of two shareholder groups. So they didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But these shareholder guys made enough noise at the meeting that
And
they gave up. They did it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they're coming clean, guys.
And the world is changing. The United Nations believes that by 2050, 40% of the world population will be living in areas of severe winter stress. Severe water stress. It isn't my lack of glasses, it's my lack of a brain.
I've got something
the
on
only
that one,
way
too.
they see out of this is the development of alternate energy systems that require less water. Now, this is really interesting. Less water than conventional power plants.
Well, pretty much everything requires water.
Everything that's
in power.
thermal requires water.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is no fossil fuels. This is just separate from the issue about carbon emissions. No fossil fuel plants, but also no nuclear.
Yep, because that uses plenty of water too.
They use a lot of water, and wind and solar don't use water.
Yeah,
Hydropower makes a lot of sense in a situation like this if it's carefully placed with consideration for the land and the people and the water resources.
this
What
was
in
the
world is that?
image that came up from that article that you're talking about.
Yeah.
According to the United Nations, the world could be in for a severe water and energy crisis. And that's a dike in Holland,
Oh, is it? Okay. Yes.
which, incidentally, there's hydro potential there, which I don't think they're even using.
Yeah, you run the water through a hole in the dike, and
Yeah.
the one that the kid put his finger in.
Yeah.
Okay, he said it, not me. Yeah, there might be hydro potential there. I don't know what the Dutch would think of that.
Increased cravings for more water and energy could badly strain the planet's limited resources in the decades to come.
And they're worried about wars as a result of this.
Absolutely.
The Pentagon is worried about wars. The Pentagon says that climate change could be one of the biggest security problems we've got, and we've got to deal with it.
Yeah, this article doesn't mention it, but large corporations are trying to lock up water supplies in third world countries around the world, Africa, South America. In South America, a large corporation called the Bush family bought a piece of land in, I think it was Uruguay,
Oh,
that's bigger than Rhode Island,
oh my gosh!
and it's sitting on top of the largest water aquifer in South America.
Wow,
And they did this about 20 years ago.
wow.
When Bush Jr. was president, his daughters went down there and visited the ranch.
The ranch.
Yeah.
Okay. Uruguay is an interesting country, but I didn't realize that they had that aquifer under them.
Well, I bet you the Bushes knew it.
I bet they did. Yeah. Okay. March 24th marked the 25th anniversary of the Exxon Valdez oil spill,
I got that guy.
an event that altered Prince William Sound ecosystem perhaps forever. The once robust herring fisheries remain closed. Exxon's bill, $92 million, remains unpaid.
Still hasn't been paid.
That's
Man,
from the
that's
Anchorage Daily News. It's not entirely their fault. This is partly because the politicians in Alaska haven't got their act together to tell them what to do. So it may be that Exxon's been standing there with a check saying, guys, do you want this? And just not
It
got
may
an
be,
answer.
but I don't think so.
Probably not. You know, it's one of those things where you give everybody a break except for a few people.
Well, there's the Exxon Valdez over there, renamed
Making
the
a mess.
Oriental Nicety.
Oriental nicety.
And it apparently isn't running anymore.
Oh. Well,
It was the second largest oil spill in United States history.
yeah, well, that's sad. The largest, I think, was somewhere in the Southwest on land.
Was it really?
Yeah, I think so.
I
There was-
don't
I
really
think it
know
was a-
that, but
Yeah, I looked it up at the time. I don't remember the details, but it was a long time ago. Well, on the 25th, we got this news item, which was probably late, but for us it was on the 25th. Green Mountain Power, based in Colchester, Vermont, and California Governor Jerry Brown. What would they have in common? Were among three, and I've forgotten who the third was, to receive a National Solar Energy Award, as Vote Solar announced Friday its 2014 Solar Championship Award recipients. So
Well, I gotta give-
congratulations to Green Mountain
got to
Power.
give Green Mountain Power its due. They are very open to distributed energy, alternative energy, renewable energy,
Well,
particularly compared to some of the utilities out in the south and the west who are fighting it tooth and nail.
their statement about renewable power was that their job is to come up with a new business model, and that I think is an interesting thing. You know, there's some interesting people in this world, and I think the folks who, Mary Powell and the other folks up at Green Mountain Power, are interesting people
Yeah, we're going to get somebody from Green Mountain Power on the show in the near future.
in the near future. Promise. Okay. Also, the same day, in new estimates released that day, the World Health Organization reports that in 2012, around 7 million people died. 1 out of 8 people who died during the course of the year in the world as a result of air pollution exposure.
Yeah, listen,
7 million
I got a
people.
nice air pollution
A
picture.
good
here.
air pollution picture.
Good air pollution picture. Let me pull it up here. It's interesting. We've shown some pictures of the Orient, particularly China, with people walking around with.
Is that an air pollution picture?
That's an air pollution picture.
Well, you got to put it on.
I'll get it up there.
Yeah, you don't need me. There you go. Air pollution, guys. Those look like cooling towers.
They are
Where
cooling towers. So what we're seeing coming out of those towers isn't really, strictly speaking, air pollution. It's
Steam.
water, steam.
Yeah.
But those 3 big chimneys, you can't see much coming out of it. If
But
you
they're
look
making
closely,
this.
the middle one definitely is emitting something. But what's coming out of those chimneys is the things you got to worry about. That's
What
one of the reasons why they're so high.
Yeah. The old approach to dealing with air pollution was make the chimney higher.
Yeah.
It doesn't do much good for the planet. It may keep the people in the plant from suffocating, but
I don't know where this picture was taken. I believe it's somewhere in California. It's an old picture. That's like back from the 40s,
oh, really?
50s maybe.
Yeah.
But look at the size of that plant.
Yeah, that's big.
It's
Is
a
that
coal burning
plant. Okay. Wow. Okay. Now here is the thing that we were mentioning earlier, or a thing related to the thing mentioned earlier. And in fact, you know, as I look at this, I said that we were only going to have one item, but we may have two. A Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, that's FERC, analysis found a fairly easy way for terrorists to knock out all the electric grids in the United States, and not just for a short time, but for about a year and a half. That's not good for business, to lose power for a year and a half.
Well, we've talked about that in a different context, talking about the sun possibly doing it.
Yes, that's right.
But as I mentioned earlier in the show, these places are totally unprotected.
Well, they're getting
even
protection
Yankee
now.
is quite vulnerable.
Yeah, somebody, and I've forgotten where this was, took a high-powered rifle and shot up a bunch of transformers out west. And I think they shot something like 17 of them before the...
They shot the transformers.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they were just popping them off one after another. And this went over a period of about an hour. They blew out 17 transformers before anybody figured out that there was something really wrong and sent out somebody to find out what was going on. And by the time they got there, the person who had been doing this was long since gone.
Well, you know,
But
it's commonplace during hunting season for non-thinking hunters to pop off the insulators in high voltage.
Oh my gosh!
It happens every year. You know, it doesn't make the papers. It's so common.
Yeah.
It's just a stupid thing to do.
Just a stupid thing to do.
I mean, it's not that the guy has got any terrorists in mind, or even
It's not
wants
that
to
the guy
damage
has got
something.
any brains.
He sees an insulator and says, "Oh, I wonder, can I hit that?"
Yeah.
Bingo.
How many sparks are going to come?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, but the federal government is getting very upset about that, and I think if we don't have it already in the as much as I dislike some of the federal stuff that they do about, you know, what was it that my kids were telling me? There was a sign in an air terminal saying no humor allowed. I was only joking. No humor allowed.
Take a look at some of the vulnerabilities right here in Brattleboro.
Yeah.
There's 3 substations in town. They're protected by a fence and a television camera.
Yes.
And a sign that says "Keep out."
Yes.
You take a look at the transmission lines all through Vermont, and what's next to the
everywhere, really.
transmission lines? There's a road.
Yeah.
And who uses that road? Well, in the wintertime it's snowmobilers, in the summertime it's four-wheelers. They're there all the time.
Yep.
I would say it's impossible to build enough fences and put enough security in those transmission lines to protect them.
Well, there are ways of handling that. One of them is don't be dependent on transmission lines.
Well, that is the answer. Ultimately, the answer is distributed power. It's a
Right.
totally different grid model.
Yeah.
And large transmission lines are going to be a much less important part of that.
But what they said in this particular thing was the FERC had said that one industrial plant in the United States and 7 distribution centers for the grid, if those were attacked successfully,
I read that. Everything would be out.
everything would be out for probably a year and a half. And I want to point out, lest we be alarming people, my own assessment of that kind of event
Yeah.
is that it would take a level of coordination that would probably not be achievable by anybody.
Well, not by any individual or group of
I don't think a nation
I would
could
say
do it.
maybe governments might.
I don't think a government could do it. If you think about Jimmy Carter sending those helicopters to try to get the people trapped in the embassy out, and how that went, I think there's too much that can go wrong. We're talking about 8 targets here, and
So your good news is that this would be probably too difficult
I think this
to
would be
implement.
really, really hard to do. It's not something that is likely. On the
Well, I
other
don't think
hand,
it's likely.
the next thing that we've got coming up, which would do the same thing, is not as unlikely. The Earth narrowly missed being hit by a massive coronal ejection. You happen to have a coronal ejection here, Tom? Let's see a coronal ejection. During the summer of 2012, according to a new study, the effect of such an event could damage the electric grid and electronic devices that could take years to repair.
Now look at that picture. There's a picture of the Earth. That's not the Earth.
Now,
That's just there to give us a...
Move your mouse and so people will see where it is that you're talking about. Ah, there we go. Okay. That is an image that indicates the relative
the Earth
size of the Earth compared to this thing that's under it, which is a bunch of mass of the sun which is being ejected. And that mass, most of it will fall back onto the sun, but part of it just goes into space and travels through the solar system. And by golly, if you happen to get hit by it, you're going to be jangled.
I would think. From this article, or one very much like it, it seems that we missed such an ejection by 6 days. If it happened 6 days later, we'd have been in deep doo-doo.
The trajectory of this massive stuff was 6 days up or 6 days down on the path of the Earth around the sun. So the effect of this, if we get hit by a thing like that, is that any transformer that's online is likely to be fried. And so if people know that it's coming, then they could shut the transformers down and say, okay, the electric grid is going to be off for a day or two.
That they can do, and I'm sure they have plans to do exactly that.
Yeah, and we will note that the last time a coronal mass of this type came by was the time they were reporting, which they realized came by about a year after the event.
Say that again?
They didn't find out that coronal mass was coming until after it had already passed.
Oh. That's not going to help us much.
I may be wrong, but that's the impression I get from the article. They did a study, and the study found that there was this coronal event. And I don't think that bodes well. I have read elsewhere that usually if it's going to hit the Earth, they do know that it's coming, and they know many hours in advance, at least 8 and possibly as much as a couple of days.
I think it's a couple of days.
And
because this isn't radiation, this is particles.
This is a big mass.
So they take time to get to
Yeah,
here.
they do. It takes time to get here. And if they know it's coming, they can shut off the transformers, they can shut down the grid. And by the way, if this happens, folks, you got to protect your computers. And I don't know what you do about computers that are in cars. This is something that I find bothersome.
They're going to be destroyed. Or they could conceivably be destroyed.
I would hope they would not be, but you know, so many of our cars are controlled by computers now that
The new ones are totally controlled.
yeah.
I'm listening to, I can't think of the guy's name, the car doctor, I think he calls himself.
Yeah.
And he's talking about these computers. They literally control everything in a modern car.
Yeah. And
the average street corner mechanic can't fix it.
That's right. I had a Prius, and the car would not accelerate. So I called the garage, and they looked at it. Obviously, this is a Toyota dealer, and they said that the problem with that car was the accelerator computer. There was a computer that controlled the accelerator.
Just for the accelerator.
Just for the accelerator. When I got that car, I was told that car had more computer power in it, and this is a 2001 Prius. This is the first group sold in the United States. They said that the first mission to put men on the moon had less computer power, whole thing,
than your car.
than that car did. And you know, this speaks to the changes in
There's
computers.
probably more computing power in this thing.
Do you know how much memory you've got in that?
I think it's 16 gigs.
All right, 16 gigabytes. All right, each byte of the 16 billion bytes you've got, more than 16 billion, has 8 bits.
Yeah.
All right. So what's 8 times 16? 128. So it's 16 gigabytes is 128 billion bits. And the first computer I worked on had core memory, which cost $1 a bit.
Wow.
That's 128 billion dollars you've got in your pocket.
And my first computer had 64K.
My first
memory.
computer had 16.
Can you top this? Do I hear 8?
My first computer, the first computer I had experience with had Core, that I told you about. The first computer I bought for $1,000 had 16K of RAM, and it had an 8-bit processor that ran at at a million hertz, at a million hertz, yes, 1 megahertz, and it was as powerful as that big mainframe that took the entire apartment. And now we've got computers that are 10,000 times as powerful as that you can go down to Kmart and buy, or I guess, I don't know if Kmart sells them, but Kmart's gone, I guess, isn't it?
They're still around, but there are very few of them left.
Yeah. Anyway, we're off subject here. The Earth, the effect of this, if the transformers got fried, the electric grid would be down. There is no factory in the United States making these transformers.
That's correct.
If it hit the United States, it would probably also hit other countries just as hard. And the countries that do have the facilities to make the transformers undoubtedly would be supplying themselves before they supplied us.
From what I've heard, Europe is far more advanced along the line of protecting in this event than we are.
Right. We can protect those transformers. We can protect the computers. We can, all of this can be protected. There's a thing called a Faraday cage. Mm-hmm. And when I first started working with PCs, there was a computer of a type called it wasn't called a Storm, but it had a name like that, which had a Faraday cage. And they were putting the Faraday cage on it not to protect that, but to protect the computer, so that a person typing on it would not be sending a signal out, so that people could read what was being typed from a block away. But this is government stuff. But it was the point is, by taking proper measures, we can avoid this kind of thing. They were worried about it in 2012. They were really worried about it in 2013. We're at the part of the cycle where it's becoming rapidly less likely to happen, and it'll be 10 or 12 years before we get into that part of the cycle again. Hopefully people will be bright enough to do something about that before it happens. Looking at the history of the United States, I would say the chances of our actually accomplishing that are about 1 in 10. The first event of that type that was noticed, by the way, was one that fried the entire telegraph system.
That was, they called it the Carrington event.
Carrington event.
1853 or something
59.
Like that. 59, yeah, wow.
I'll forget that tomorrow, but anyway, they had, telegraph keys that were disconnected from their power sources were spontaneously sending transmissions and receiving transmissions, and sparks jumping from the telegraph wires were setting things on fire.
And the messages were obscene.
Were they? This is Mother Nature speaking. I want you to know what we think of you. Okay, let's get out of this. We're going to jump to the next day. 26th, a bill repealing the renewable energy standards for utilities companies won approval in the Kansas Senate with a vote of 25 to 15. The vote was scheduled to go to the House next. The current standard requires utility companies to receive 20% of their energy from renewable sources by 2020. And I'm not going to comment on that, and neither are you, because this is going to come up again.
My lips are sealed.
Next item, solar energy now costs the same as conventional generated electricity in Germany, Italy, and Spain, a report revealed. The research found, however, that high installation costs were impeding other countries, including the United States, folks, from achieving grid parity. And the fact that we've got installation costs doing that is largely because of problems that relate to laws that have to do with permitting and stuff like that. The cost of advertising, and in addition to that, other soft costs. And if you want to lower your electric bill, you get rid of those.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of lobbying going on.
Yeah, there is.
That's preventing this stuff from happening.
Yes, there's that. As we just saw reading that thing about Kansas.
Yeah.
Of course, that was funded, I think, by the Koch brothers and others who want to make
Well, there's that
sure.
ALEC out there.
ALEC.
They're getting into energy now.
Yeah.
And that's Koch brothers' money.
That is. Wholesale power prices in Germany have plunged 34% since 2010 amid record output from renewables, while electric demand last year slumped to the weakest level since 2009, according to energy researcher AG Energiebilanzen. And that part of the reason why the demand is slumping is because they're taking up efficiency.
That was what I was going to ask you.
Yeah. Part of the reason is because people are generating their own power.
Yeah.
Companies are going off grid, and you know this business
Big
of
time.
let's go off grid
Big
is just
time.
a big deal.
The Swedish
And-
firm IKEA is putting solar panels on virtually everything they own.
Yeah,
Worldwide.
absolutely. Worldwide. And the cost of batteries is going down, so
Yep.
they're figuring that the battery market in Germany is going to jump by several 100% in the next 3 or 4 years, which means that people really will be entirely separated from the grid if that's what they want to do. Well, anyway.
And
Now, this one is cute. You've got a picture of rail power storage.
yes, I certainly do. I was just thinking of it as you were talking about
Yeah,
energy storage.
This is fun. We could do this in Vermont, but we won't, I don't think, because we've got better
I
things
got
to
to
do.
find this one, but it's
Okay.
here.
I
Here
will
it
read
is.
it.
Here we go.
Okay.
Here we go.
Rail power storage is conceptually simple. During low demand periods, power is used to pull a chain of weighted train cars uphill. And there they will sit, losing no power to degradation until needed in a high demand period when their return downhill produces power. And there we've got a picture of a train.
There's this. This is an experimental. They're trying this out,
Well, it's going to work. I mean, it's
but you can see it's an electric train.
yeah.
It's got to be an electric train for this to work, and there's a third rail there. And way in the background, you can see
All those wind
a whole
turbines.
bunch of wind turbines.
Wow, look at that.
Now, I'm not sure whether this is a special car they had made for this or whether this is some kind of a hopper car, because the article said that this technology was first developed in Australia to bring ore out of mines, surface mines.
Wow.
So they load these cars up with ore and drive them uphill for 6 miles or so. So the technology exists to make the cars, and it's just a matter of it's it's pumped storage, but in a different way.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's brilliant.
Yep. And it could be done anywhere there's hills, although in this particular, as you pointed out before the show started, this particular shot shows you it's pumped storage in a land that has very little water. And so this could be done anywhere that you've got steep grades, long hills, and so forth.
In the article, they're mentioning 3,000 feet of elevation above the start of their trip.
3,000 feet of elevation.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're going uphill a long time, and they
Yeah.
sit up there in the top of the hill till they need them,
Yeah.
and then they run them downhill.
Yeah.
And regenerative braking feeds it right back into the grid through the same third rail
Wow.
that they use to bring the car up.
So if you have power plants that are generating power that's not being used, and there's excess power on the grid, this thing goes uphill. And if there's not enough power on the grid,
Exactly.
it goes downhill.
And the article mentions that each car will be equipped with a 2-megawatt generator. So they're not tiny, these things. These are pretty big.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. On the 27th. Is today the 27th? I think it is.
Today is the 27th.
Now, I want to warn the audience, you may be viewing on a day other than the 27th, but we're stuck in the 27th. This is Groundhog Day for us, which is over and over. The First Solar expects its average manufacturing cost to fall by nearly half, from an average of 63 cents per watt in 2013 to 35 cents per watt in 2018. That will bring the total cost of a module, including racking and inverters, and I think must be the manufacturing cost, from around $1.59 a watt to below $1 a watt by 2017.
I think they're talking about installed on your house.
No, I don't think so.
Because I think they're below $1 a watt in the manufactory now.
No, they're not.
They're not, huh? Okay.
In the manufacturing, yes, but you as a homeowner, if you're a homeowner, can buy solar panels just the panels,
The panels, yeah.
for prices that are not very far above 63 cents a watt. And in fact, I've seen prices below that, but they were panels that were being sold in sales of one type or another. The installed price is going to be significantly above that.
So you got to figure out how to install them.
Yeah, well, if you're doing it, if it's a do-it-yourself deal, that's going to be very low. But if you're talking about buying installed materials, we'll talk about that. If we can get Peter Thorell in here, I'm hoping he'll be our next guest. He can tell us about installed costs.
Yeah, I got a picture here of an uninstalled solar installation.
An uninstalled installation. How do you do that? Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
That's how you do
I'll
it.
try and pull it up here. This is
Okay.
in Scituate, Mass.
Scituate. I used to live down near Scituate. It looks like it's covered with snow.
And the article is about ALEC, who we just mentioned.
Oh, really?
Solar industry defeats ALEC net metering attacks in Utah and Washington.
Yeah, well,
But this is a solar panel assembly being put together. They haven't put the panels in yet. So all of this is the physical supports that
Yes.
they're putting up. Now, you don't have to go this way, but that's what Scituate is doing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it looks like everything is covered with snow, but if you look at that carefully, you'll see that that's obviously a summertime
That's
job.
summertime, yep.
Yeah. Okay. A measure to repeal the state's 2009 renewable energy standards for power generation was rejected Wednesday by the Kansas House of Representatives by a vote of 77 to 42. Now, that was the same one that was passed the previous day. And
Oh,
I'm
okay,
just
we're catching
wondering-
up now.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, did the House of Representatives do that on purpose the following day just to thumb their nose at the Senate? Maybe.
I don't know anything about the politics out there, but that's believable.
Yeah. This was despite critics who argued that requirements drive up utility bills and unfairly push one industry over another. Well, you know, I think if you're going to, there are ways that you can unfairly push one industry over another that are kind of reasonable. You know, let's push legal industries over organized crime. How about that? Is that unfair?
Well, it depends on what you mean by organized crime. I mean, I consider Wall Street to be organized
Well,
crime.
there you go. Okay, and our last item for today, and this is kind of cool also. Pacific Gas and Electric Company announced an important milestone for California's renewable portfolio standard. I can speak part of the time. The utility delivered 22.5% of its power from eligible renewable resources in 2013 and is on track to meet the state's clean energy goals for 2020.
I think that's basically this.
Yeah. Now, one of the things about this is they say it delivered 22.5% for the first time. That's for the whole year.
Yeah.
And the previous record level for a year was below 20%. So this is a significant growth.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to be 40% by 2020. It's believable that they would achieve that. They'll have to grow a little bit faster. They'll have to continue that. But I think as you know, as the ability to build and install renewable materials is developed, the installation will happen faster.
Well, we can see the trend. We can say which way
Yep.
things are going. And
Yep.
there's so many bright people working on different aspects of this. Some of them are going to hit on some good solutions. Some of them have already.
Okie doke. Well, that's the news. And now what should we do, Tom? Do you have pictures to show?
I got
or
a
shall
couple of pictures that were related to what you said.
Okay.
Maybe they weren't directly.
Let's look at 'em.
But I linked to them. I thought this was interesting because it's a picture of a geothermal installation, geothermal ground. They found a place In this case, where there's hot water under the earth. Let me get it up there.
Okay, now where is this?
Well, it's Malta, but I don't know what state that's in.
It's where?
Malta. It's not
Malta.
not the island of Malta. This is definitely might be
Malta, California.
California. Might be Utah. There's mountains in the background, and I
Yeah.
failed to record where Malta
okay.
was. And
That's
I did
okay.
look it up, and I forgot.
People should know about this, that geothermal, there's a number of different kinds of geothermal. There was a fellow who asked me, George, what do you think about geothermal? And I said, if you're talking about Vermont, I think it's a bad idea. And then I realized maybe what he was talking about was something different from what I was thinking. And in fact, that was the case.
was.
He was talking about geothermal heat for a house, which I think is an excellent idea. But there's geothermal, such as probably
Geothermal
this one.
earth.
There's geothermal which you're using for producing power, where you go down a mile or two.
There's hot water down there.
There's hot water. There's hot rock. You can use the hot rock to heat water,
Like Iceland.
like Iceland. And in fact, in Iceland, they have actually drilled right into the magma, molten rock, to get geothermal power. There's another way of doing it, which is and this could be done in Vermont, I believe, and that would be to drill down. You drill down a well, you drill down another well near it, you force cold water down that first well into the hot rock, and it makes the rock contract, and that makes the rock crack. When the rock cracks, the water will flow over to the other well, and it'll come up again. And when it comes up, it's hot.
This is
This is-
similar to what we just talked about, but it's a different
Yeah,
variation of it.
It's a different variation, and it's called enhanced geothermal. And it is, if you think about it, it sounds suspiciously like fracking.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And in
So what are
fact,
the second order consequences of this?
well, the people who are in favor of it point out that they're not using chemicals, they're just using water.
Well, it's a step in the right
It's
direction.
a step in the right direction. The second thing is they're talking about two wells that are not very far apart. They're only about maybe 100 yards apart, maybe less. And so the amount of cracking in the earth that has been done is really kept to a minimum. The detractors who are dealing with this look at it and they say, no, that's not the history of this thing doesn't say that it's safe. For example, there was the city of Basel in Switzerland tried doing this. They built a geothermal plant, and then when it started producing power, people complained about the
Or
earthquakes.
I was going to say it's earthquake potential. Yeah.
So they shut it down at a loss. And from my point of view, I don't mind people experimenting with a thing like this, but I don't think that we should buy into it wholesale until
Not until it's been worked. The bugs have been worked
until
out.
the bugs have been worked out, or alternatively, we've discovered that it really is not going to give us what we want, especially considering that, the DOE says that Vermont can get about 15% of its power from biomass, and about, I forget the number, 30% or 40% or whatever it is from hydro, and about 135% of what we need from wind, and about 600 and something percent of what we need from enhanced geothermal, which we were just talking about, and about 1,000% of the power that we need from solar. Now, enhanced geothermal in that picture looks like it could be an important part. And I wouldn't want to abandon it just because people in Switzerland had problems with it. But at the same time, we've got enough power from solar to give us everything we need times 10. And we've got enough power available from wind to give us whatever we need probably when the solar isn't working. And when neither of those is working, we've probably got enough power from other things to make up the background. But another thing that I want to mention too about wind power, I'm just right now writing an article for Green Energy Times about a town in Kansas called Greensburg. And Greensburg got wiped out by wind. They were hit by
A windstorm wiped them out.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are a little city. I think, I don't know, but I think they're the the county seat of Kiowa County, but they're a little city. They're 1.75 square miles. This is not big. You know, so if you're in the middle of the city, there's nothing as far as a mile away from you. That's in the city. It had a population of 1,500. It got hit by an F5 tornado that covered the whole thing, and they had it was over 200-mile-an-hour winds. 95% of the buildings were flattened. The other 5% were extremely damaged, and I don't know that any of them survived. When the building inspectors came in and said this has to be cut down and that has to be cut down, they may have cut them all down. But when the town council just met and there were very few deaths because they had 20 minutes warning.
And they have storm cells there too.
Yeah, they do. But the town council met and one of the first things they decided was that all of the city's buildings had to be built to LEED Platinum standards. And there were a lot of businesses and other organizations that followed suit and went to LEED certified buildings. Now, with a population of about 800, this town has the highest number of LEED certified buildings per capita of any city. I should say it's a city of any city in the world. And but one of the things that they did was they put in a lot of wind power, and they put in a wind farm of 10 turbines totaling 12.5 megawatts, 3 miles from the city limits. But they also, people in the city who owned businesses or ran organizations looked at this and they said, well, why shouldn't we have our own? And the city did not discourage anybody from putting in wind turbines. And there wasn't
Privately owned.
Privately owned. So the John Deere dealership has 2, and Best Western has 3, and the high school or whatever the school is has 1, and the Arts Center, which they're very proud of, has 3 wind turbines and a bunch of solar. But the one picture that I think really is interesting about this is, and it's one that we'll have at some point in the future, the hospital has a wind turbine, which is so close to the hospital that the employees have to walk under it to get into the building because it's between the employee parking lot and the hospital. So here is this wind turbine that is, what are you clicking on there?
This is a different town.
Okay.
But they did something similar.
Oh, yeah. Now these are different kinds of turbines too.
I'll try and locate them with the mouse here. Let's see.
These are vertical wind turbines.
Yeah. Can you see the mouse?
I can see it. I hope the people on.
That's a vertical wind turbine, and there's another one there.
They're small. Can you tell about how tall those things are?
Offhand, I can't. About maybe 3 times as high as a light pole.
Okay, so they're fairly tall. Okay, these vertical wind turbines are interesting because they're small wind turbines. But
that's a playground right there.
Yeah, you can site these things right next to...
That's a park right there.
Yeah. I mean, here are 2 wind turbines sited within feet of a park and a playground.
But they're vertical axis.
Yes.
So they turn this way, they don't make any noise, and the wind can blow from any direction and they're going to turn.
That's right.
And with only 2 small ones, they're only using it to provide the power for the lights of this little village.
Right, right.
The street lights.
Street lights.
But it's neat, you know.
Yeah, it is. It's very neat. And you can put these things in cities because since they don't care what direction the wind is coming from, the wind can change direction radically very fast. And the turbine
doesn't care.
Doesn't care. It just keeps right on going. So anyway, Greensburg, Kansas has, I called the Department of Tourism and asked them, the woman there who was in charge of it, how many wind turbines there are in Greensburg, Kansas, right in the city. Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, well, let's see. And then she was counting them off, there's this one and that one and this one. There's 14 or 15. There are 14 or 15 medium-sized to large-sized wind turbines
right in downtown.
Right in the city. And they're right next to things. And I talked to a woman who is the woman who answers the phone at City Hall, and I said, "Don't you get complaints about the noise?" And she said, "Oh, I would think that I would get the complaints if there were any. I've never heard one."
That's interesting.
And she said, "Let me check and see if anybody has heard any complaints." And she walked around the City Hall asking people there, "Have you heard any complaints?"
That's interesting.
And nobody had ever heard of any complaints. And I said, "Well, how close are they?" And she said, "Well, they're pretty close. I've got one 2 blocks down from me. They're all over the place." When I say Best Western has got 3 turbines, I mean, if you're going to
They're in the parking lot.
Basically, that's right. They're everywhere. The hospital has a wind turbine. This kind of gives a new twist, as you might say, talking about wind turbines, to the idea of noise bothering people, keeping them from doing things. So
Is it the noise that's bothering people, or is it the annoyance that's bothering people?
I think it's the fact that they feel disempowered.
Yeah, it's as much psychological as
Well,
anything else.
the Australian Medical Association said it's psychological.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah.
As far as they were concerned, and you know, they've been fighting this battle. We'll just see. You know, the people in Kansas have decided that they're not going to turn away from renewables, their renewable standard. And Koch Industries has been putting quite a lot of time and money, or the Koch brothers, I should say, from what I understand, have been putting a lot of time and money into trying to revoke the renewable energy standards. The
As I
various
said
states
earlier,
have.
this outfit, ALEC, which is controlled by the Kochs, is now starting to attack generation.
Actually, they're attacking solar.
Solar, yeah.
They're attacking solar. Every form of renewable power is under attack. And one of the things that I've seen in the news more than once is that the idea that is being promoted that solar power is not safe to have on your roof because it will, if the fire company is called and they need to use water to fight a fire, the firemen will be electrocuted by the solar power.
Oh, did anybody ever think about shutting it off?
Well, did anybody ever think about the idea that electricity does not get shut off when there's a fire unless the fire company shuts it off, usually?
Yeah.
Most homeowners don't, run down to the basement.
No, of course not. Oh, it's a fire. I got to shut the power off.
Yeah, that's right.
That doesn't happen.
And so
Let's get your butt out of there.
That's
what
right.
happens.
And so I think this is a specious argument, and it's specious like a lot of the other arguments. The arguments against wind, and there are arguments against hydro, and there's arguments against everything. And I argue against things. I argue against fossil fuels because we're in trouble because of fossil fuels. I argue against nuclear because nuclear is not going to provide for us. And as a matter of fact, if you think about that, the safety of nuclear plants is something they tout. I don't buy it. I don't buy the idea.
We're not
of
allowed
safety.
to talk about that.
We're not? Oh. Then I'm not allowed to say, out of 480 nuclear power plants that have ever gone online, well, Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and the sodium reactor experiment just outside of
Chicago.
No, that was outside of Los Angeles. And it says experiment in the name, but they were putting power on the grid. And Fermi, which is outside of Detroit, and 3 in Japan, and 1 at Chapel Cross in Scotland, and 1 at Bohunica in Czechoslovakia, and 1 at Greifswald in East Germany, and 2 in Saint-Laurent in France. It's 12 nuclear reactors. You can.
I'm glad they're so safe.
Yeah, 12 of them have melted down.
Wow.
12. Now, a couple of them, one of them we know blew up. I suspect another one also blew up. I just don't see the explanation for anything else in Japan. But some of these, like Fermi, melted down. They tried to clean it up and restart the reactor, which is a job that took years. But 12 out of 480 is 2.5% of all of the reactors have melted down.
This isn't just failing. This is a big-time failure.
This is a big failure, and when it really speaks to And they were talking initially about one core damage event per 10,000 reactor years. We've had 16,000 reactor years, and the standard has been raised. And it turns out that they're talking about 1 in 20,000 now, and 1 in 50,000, and the actual experience in the field has been 1 in 1,350. So the core damage events are happening more than 10 times as fast as they should have, and there's a reason for that, because the calculations that they do don't include human error, because you can't enumerate that. So the biggest thing, actually the only thing that has caused these problems, and when they say 1 in 20,000, they don't mean 1 in 20,000, they mean 1 in 20,000 unless some fool gets his hands on it. And when they come to us now with a new generation of reactors, they say these are foolproof. And I suspect that what they really mean is these are foolproof unless some fool gets his hands on it. So anyway, we're at the end of our hour. And I've been lecturing people, which is very sad. Got a parting message, Tom?
Well, I had some more stuff I wanted to talk about.
Well, let's do it, actually. It's not. Let's just go on. Okay?
Well, we started talking about geothermal.
We got to say goodbye. Goodbye, everybody who's on the broadcast, and for those people who are watching on the webcast,
we'll be here a little longer.
We'll be here a little bit longer.
Yeah.
We'll see Tom's pictures and hear what he.
We started talking about geothermal.
Yeah.
And I showed you a picture of earth-based geothermal.
Yes.
And then you went on to some variations on that.
I hijacked your discussion, I admit.
And there's actually some parts of Vermont which use earth-based geothermal to heat homes and been doing it for a long time.
Well, no, wait a minute. Are we talking about drilling way down?
Not way, way down. No.
So this is earth-based geothermal, and are they using heat pumps?
No.
They're not. Interesting. So this,
I'm not. It's been a long time since I saw this. I think it's somewhere up around Perkinsville, somewhere not too far from Springfield.
Okay.
There's a whole little area there where a whole bunch of houses were built right after World War II.
Oh,
and
wow.
they were heated by hot water from the ground.
Very cool.
And from what I understand, it was all low-tech. The local well-built driller drilled down, found the hot water. They pump it through the house through radiators. You know, and there's maybe a dozen homes in this area here that were capable of doing that.
That's amazing.
I don't know where it is anymore. I probably couldn't find it. I think I remember when I first heard about it, I was thinking about buying a piece of property in Vermont, and I was being toured around by real estate people.
Yeah.
And they took us, myself and my two friends they took us through this area and pointed it out. So that's all I really know about it. But but anyhow, there's other forms of geothermal that we haven't touched base on.
Right.
The big one happening in Vermont right now is air-based geothermal.
Air-based.
Air source
You're talking
geothermal.
about air source heat pumps, though.
Air source. Well, but they're geothermal. They're heat pumps.
There's
air source heat
ground
pumps.
source heat pumps and air source heat pumps.
Yeah.
And the ground source heat pumps, you dig a trench typically, and then you lay a pipe in that trench in a coil.
Yeah, and you grab the heat that's inherent in the ground.
Yeah, all you have to do is get a little bit below the frost line.
Yeah.
And,
less than 10 feet.
Yeah.
And it's like 50 degrees all year round.
Yeah.
And you're not creating the heat.
See, this
you're
is
moving the heat.
When the fellow asked me, "What do you think of geothermal?" and I said, "I don't think this is a good idea from Vermont." I thought he was talking about the enhanced geothermal that we were talking about, cracking the ground. But here you're talking about the other kind, which is the kind that I think is probably good if you can afford to do it.
Well, the air source does away with digging a hole in the ground.
Yes.
And they're taking the fact that there is heat in the air.
Right.
Even though it's cold to us, it's still way above absolute zero, and there's
way
heat.
Above, yes.
That's recoverable.
A person who's accustomed to absolute zero would not be able to tell the difference between 100 below and 100 above.
And I've been told that recently, still the cheapest way to heat a house in Vermont is with old-fashioned wood stove. But there's a downside: they pollute.
Yeah.
The next to that, or in the same range,
in the same range, very close,
is pellets.
Yeah.
Above the next one is this air source heat pumps,
Right.
and they're starting to be used throughout Vermont in new construction
Right.
because they're relatively easy to install.
Yes.
They give you air conditioning besides heating,
Yes.
and a lot of the new developments are putting these things.
And they are very, very efficient.
They're efficient,
Yeah.
very efficient. There's something I just read, and I'll pull this one out. This one I never heard about before. Rivers and lakes providing the source of
Oh,
heat.
yes.
And
There you don't have to dig a trench. All you do
I've
is
got
throw
a
the
picture
pipe
of
in the
this
river.
Right here. Let's. Well, basically, yeah. Here's a picture of the Thames.
There you go. Is this
And-
that article that came up this last week about the
It came up last week in something
it
that
was
you
it was a district heating.
exactly. This particular system, the first of its kind in the UK, it's a heat pump in the Thames, which provides hot water for radiators, showers, and taps in nearly 150 homes and a 140-room hotel and conference center in South London. So it's not providing power, it's just providing heat.
Heat.
But it's saving, according to this article, 500 tons of carbon emissions from being released every year into the atmosphere.
Interesting.
So I'm not sure what these pictures actually are, but I think both of them have to do with this project. But if they could put them in the Thames, we could put them in Connecticut.
Oh yeah. Well, Connecticut River freezes. The Thames doesn't. Believe it or not.
Well, basically, yes, you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen pictures of the Thames that was frozen. But
Yeah,
it's like
it doesn't-
1880. you
Yeah,
know.
it doesn't freeze normally.
It doesn't freeze
And
normally.
even though London is about as far north as Hudson's Bay, it's a much different environment. My daughter's been in Glasgow, which is quite a ways north of London, and her weather there has been in the 40s every day all winter. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's averaged in the 40s. She
Well,
says
the machines
she says,
that they are using here produce 110-degree water.
yeah.
And what it says here, water is withdrawn from 6 feet below the surface of the river, where the latent heat from the sun is sustained at around 45 to 50 degrees all year round.
Wow.
The water is filtered twice and fed through a pump where the low-grade heat is harvested by heat exchangers, while the cooler water is pumped back to the river. And the heat exchangers transfer the heat to a series of condensers, which boosts the 50-degree heat to 110-degree hot water using a process of reverse refrigeration.
Which is a heat pump.
Yeah, that's heat pump, exactly.
Yeah.
This is used to heat domestic hot water piped into nearby homes. So it's just another different approach. And I think the total, after all this is said and done, is going to involve all these different technologies.
Well, I think that's what we're going to do in the future in Vermont. Is that we're going to have a series. It's not going to be all of the above, but it's going to be all of the above, less nuclear and fossil fuels. And I say less nuclear kind of guardedly because I'm not. It may be that somebody will come across with a nuclear plant that actually is safe. I haven't seen one built, but that doesn't mean that it
No,
is.
there's new ones on the drawing board that look promising,
Yeah.
but they're 20 years away from reality.
Yeah, and 20 years is not going to help us.
Not going to help us right now. Not going to help us with global warming.
Global warming, and what we need to do is deal with global warming. And I think what that means is that we have to focus on the technology that we've got available to us, and switch to it very aggressively. And I think that we are not doing it sufficiently aggressively so far. What is this that you're
This is
looking
another one I'm going to pull up. It's ocean power.
at? Oh yeah.
This is down in Rhode Island, Brown University. Those things we're looking at, this is interesting now, they're not very large. And those horizontal things are basically similar to wings,
Okay.
okay? And they cause this to go up and down with the waves. As the tide is going in, they go up. As the tide is going down, they go down. And they're generating power.
Yeah, there's a number of different ways that they generate power from the ocean. Waves is one. Tides is another, where you have a tidal lagoon and you have water flowing into it, which goes through turbines as the tide comes in, and water flowing out of it.
This is what it says in the article. According to the Energy Department report cited by Brown University, The most effective locations are in shallow bays and inlets, typically no deeper than 30 feet, where the narrowness of the channel speeds up the pace of tidewater, both coming and going.
Okay.
So we're not talking the Bay of Fundy here. We're talking something down in Rhode Island. You know?
Yes. They're building a big one, expensive one off the coast, off the south coast of Wales in the Severn Estuary.
And what it says, basically, this cuts out conventional underwater turbines because they're basically too big.
Yeah. Well, they're also making underwater turbines. I mean, basically, I can think of 3 different technologies that are
Smaller.
no, that are ocean technologies.
Oh, okay.
One is tide, one is wave, where the up and down
wave goes up and
motion
down.
of the wave, or the side-to-side motion, rocking motion, can make energy, and the third is an actual turbine that looks kind of like one of those vertical axis wind turbines.
Sort of looks like the reel of a push-type lawnmower.
Right, it does.
Yeah.
And unlike the vertical axis wind turbine, it's put in horizontally. But turbines of that type, which are just dependent on a current, can be put in almost any river. And in addition to that, we have the run-of-course turbines like the Archimedes screw turbine and the one that James Perkins was talking about, where you have a high head and a low flow of water. Those are 2 different kinds. And then we've got turbines, other different kinds of water power using water coming over a weir. And certainly, you know, we have the old-fashioned 19th century overshot water wheels and breastshot water wheels and undershot water wheels, all of which, you know, so we've got more different kinds of water technology than you can shake a stick at, really. And
not all of it's new.
some of it is very old. And in fact, both horizontal axis, the ones with the blades that we see on the Dutch windmills, and the vertical axis, they were both invented during ancient times or the Middle Ages. I think the vertical axis first appeared in the East, in China, possibly, and the horizontal axis, did I get that right in my head? Horizontal axis in Europe and the vertical axis in Asia. I think that's right. And, you know, this is old stuff. It's just old stuff.
Well, I guess the Dutch have been pumping water out of the dikes for, what, 1,000 years?
Close to it. I think the earliest ones that I can think of were in the 13th century, and that's 800 years ago. So, yeah, and what was it that I was reading about? Something in Ireland. Somebody built. Oh, it was a tidal. It was a tidal thing. Somebody built a tidal energy project in Ireland during the Middle Ages. This is like during the 9th century or something. You know, this person, you know, figured out that you could get, and it was probably somebody milling flour. Or,
I was going to
something
say,
like
that's why they called them windmills.
Yes, that's right.
They were milling. A lot of them were used for mills.
That's right. Although the windmills in Holland were mostly for pumping
They
water.
were pumps, yeah.
A lot of them.
We call them windmills. I don't know what the Dutch call them.
I honestly don't know. When I was a kid, I lived across the river. I lived actually almost next door to a park in Illinois that it spanned 2 sides of a river, and there was a bridge. And if you crossed the bridge, the guy who built the park had he collected everything you could imagine. And one of the things that he bought as an item of a collection was a Dutch windmill, which he had disassembled and moved to Illinois and reassembled at great expense during the Depression. And he was very proud, I'm sure, of the fact that, and I think possibly rightly so, of the fact that he was employing people to do that who otherwise would have difficulty finding jobs. But there was, as a result of this, a Dutch windmill across the river from where I lived in Illinois, and it was a real, honest,
real Dutch windmill.
Dutch windmill, but it was an atypical Dutch windmill. From a distance, it looked like an ordinary Dutch windmill, but when you went inside, you realized that it had grinding wheels. So it was used for grinding grain. This was a miller's wheel and not a pump. But yeah, the dikes, the land behind the dikes was all pumped out, and it was that's how they dried it out, was by pumping it out. And that, of course, is threatened by global warming. The Dutch are very upset about that, I think.
Well, yeah, practically all of that country's below sea level.
Yeah, and global warming, by the time it's done, could put the whole country below sea level, and far enough below sea level that you couldn't build a dike to keep all the water away. People don't think about this, but you know, the dikes, the seawalls. You take, for example, New York. To protect an area with a seawall that's not very tall is not very hard. The 5.7 meter seawall at Fukushima, which the wave just went over, was expensive. But if they had built it to the standard that would have been required by the fact that there were 37 meter waves on that coast less than 100 years earlier, even
37 meters.
37 meters. It's over 120 feet.
Yeah, I was going to say it's more than 100 feet. So over 120.
Yeah. And people don't realize that those waves are not like breakers on a beach where the wave comes in, goes crash, and then disappears. This is more.
No, they stay there for a while.
This is more like a flash flood.
Yeah.
Where the waters rise for several minutes, and then they go away for several minutes, and
when they come back in fury.
Yeah, that's right. And the highest waves for this 2011 earthquake and tsunami were 37 meters, but the northeast coast of Japan had a 37 meter wave in 1896, and it had a 27 meter wave in 1933. And if people had been paying attention to that fact when that seawall was for Fukushima Daiichi was being built, they could have prevented that plant from being destroyed.
If they were paying attention, they wouldn't have built it there in the first place.
Exactly. But you see, that's the problem. If they're paying attention, they wouldn't build nuclear reactors in Japan at all.
Well, you got a point there, too.
And because every nuclear reactor, except for maybe one or two, is right at the edge of the sea. Mm-hmm. Every single one of them.
Because they wanted cooling water.
They need the cooling water. And the ones one of the things that they realized when that plant failed was that almost all of their plants are vulnerable to earthquakes or tsunamis. Some of them, they've been talking about spending billions of dollars building up a taller seawall. And as that seawall
is that a fool's errand, or?
As the seawall gets taller,
yeah.
If you double the height of the seawall, you're not doubling the cost, because you have to think about the cross section of the seawall.
I would expect you're quadrupling it, or
you're
even
quadrupling
more.
The cost, or going more. Yeah. And so, if you want to go to from 5.7 to 11.4, you're going to quadruple the cost of the seawall. But 11.4 wouldn't have stopped that 14-meter wave. So they would have had to triple it. And the interesting thing about that is there was a village that was hit by a taller wave, and the guy who was the mayor of the village during, I guess it was the 1960s, remembered the 1933 tsunami.
Wow.
And he said, we need a seawall that will protect this village. So they built a seawall, and the seawall was something like, I don't know, it was like 18 meters. I forget what it was. But the tsunami that hit there was a meter higher than seawall. But that 1 meter of water was not enough to destroy the village. It swamped the village. Mm-hmm. If they had basements, it would have, but I doubt that they had any. It would have flooded them. It flooded the village, but it didn't do any damage to any buildings. And the people in there, there's only one death, and that was somebody who went to the other side of the seawall to check on his boat.
On his boat.
To check on his boat. You wouldn't want to be on top of that seawall with a meter tall wave going over it, because you'd be swept right away. Although you wouldn't be swept out to sea, you'd be swept in. You'd probably be battered enough that there wouldn't be much left of you, I suppose.
But I had a picture here, and I don't have it, of the Bay of Fundy.
Oh, really?
It's a town in New Brunswick.
Yeah.
During high tide and during low tide.
Yeah.
And during low tide, there's a boat sitting on the sand.
Yes.
And during high tide, the boat's floating.
Yeah.
It's about 16 feet of water
Yeah.
on that wharf.
And there's a lot of, that bay is huge.
Yeah,
A lot
it
of
is.
water going in. But, you know, I remember seeing that kind of thing when I was young, and I went to, I went on a trip that went through Wales, and at Aberdyfi, which is where some of my ancestors came from in Wales, they have an estuary. And the boats are like you just said, except that it's only a few feet difference. Now, if you think about the idea of a seawall, an estuary could be closed off at not too great expense. And there are places where they do that. There's a town in Cornwall. I've never been there, but the town is called Muzzle. Okay, and
Muzzle?
Muzzle, but it is spelled Mousehole. And it's called
Okay.
Muzzle. And the reason it's called mouse hole in the way that most people would pronounce it is that the entry to the harbor is so small. And they actually close a gate.
That's ringing a bell. I've seen pictures of that.
Yeah, they actually close a gate.
They close the gate.
for that harbor.
I
And
got a
it's-
picture here of something very similar.
What is that you've got
I'll
there?
try and pull it up here.
That looks like the thing off the south coast of Wales. Is that what that is?
Well, it's in Britain.
Yeah.
This is an artist's conception, so this doesn't exist, but they're building a tidal lagoon,
Yeah.
or they propose to. So this is what it would look like, and they're impounding water on one side and generating electricity on the other
Yes,
side,
yeah.
and using the difference in the tides.
Yes. Now, do you have any idea where this is going on?
I'm
I'll
trying
bet
to-
this is. I'll bet this.
Yes, Swansea Bay.
All right. Swansea is Swansea's the south coast of Wales, and this is in the Severn Estuary, which is shaped. It has that same kind of broad mouth and a long tapering shape, so that the tides going in mount up a bit. And this is near Bristol. Swansea is not all that far from Bristol, which is an English city on the Severn, and it's actually famous for its high-tech stuff going on. But this is a huge project. It's really a huge project.
Well, I'm talking 495 megawatts.
Right. You know,
It's going to be pretty big.
it's going to be pretty big. But when you compare this to a nuclear plant, it's really, really low tech.
Yeah, it is really.
You know, I mean, it's just
Just a dam with a hole,
right.
couple
We're
holes
go-
in it.
That's right. We're going to build a dam. It's going to be 5 miles long.
This one's 6.
Is it okay?
In the Port of Swansea to enclose over 7 square miles of tidal
Now
area.
you see, that is a lot of water.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
is.
going to be coming in and going out twice every day, which means that you've got a lot of power coming, and it's very predictable about its timing. It's not going to go for 100% of the time, but it's very, very predictable.
And the estimated life of the project's 120 years.
Yes, isn't that nice? And you know what? It won't melt down.
No, it won't.
No,
No, no.
no meltdown. And it doesn't produce waste. There are people who are opposing it because of environmental damage that will be done. They're worried about shellfish and things like that. But the stuff that I've read about this says basically, well, you know, the shellfish are going to have to learn to live a different lifestyle.
I got another picture here I'd like
There's
to
some
look
doubt as to whether it will actually damage anything.
at. Yeah, I got another picture I'd like to look at. You may have read the paper about a proposed farm off of Block Island in Rhode Island.
Yep.
And this is a map of where it's going to be. It's really
Okay.
closer to the end of Long Island.
Yeah,
in New
I
York.
did. This is one of the ones I was thinking about putting into my blog, and it never made it in. Actually, it might have been in the blog, but it didn't go in to the weekly stuff.
So where it says Con there, that's New Haven. That's the end of the Connecticut River.
Right.
And that's,
Our eye is
that's,
Rhode
the,
Island.
that's the state line. And Montauk Point right there. Southampton,
Blanc Island, which is,
Block Island.
yeah.
And Block Island, I just read about, they're putting something up there too. But it's just going to provide power for Block Island.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are a lot of islands that, you know, I used to live on Plymouth Bay, and in Massachusetts, and there was a house that was for sale in Plymouth Bay, and it was a beautiful house. It had a dock. It had a couple of cottages associated with it. It had a lot of land, and I don't know. It might even have had feral horses, but you know, it was one of those things where it was on an island, and the price of the house was very low. And the reason why was because of two things. One of which was the only way to get to and from was by boat. And so whoever bought...
That's not an obstacle.
Well, it's not an obstacle for some people, and it's a huge obstacle for others.
Yeah, if you don't have a boat.
You get a boat, but you know, some people would just be unwilling to do a half-hour stint of their commute in a motorboat. You know, but particularly in bad weather. But the other thing about it was that it had no power. Now today, that house, I'd be amazed if it didn't have power.
I'm sure it would. Yeah.
Yeah. At that time, you could have gas, but you'd have to bring the bottle in yourself.
Yeah.
And so the price of it was low. But today, it's probably got power, internet, you name it.
Yeah.
You know.
This
But
other
it's still a
picture is
boat.
interesting too. On the right.
But the
there.
nice thing about a boat is you don't have to worry about, you know, unwanted visitors coming.
Yeah, this is the only reason I took a picture of this one is because it's the first I've seen of this particular type of solar array.
Okay.
It's solar thermal.
Yes. Yeah.
And instead of being dishes, and I have seen some dishes of solar thermal,
Yes.
this is a long pipe,
Trough. Yeah.
and a very long parabolic mirror.
These have actually been around for a while.
They probably have,
Yeah.
but to me it's new and clever, and
Yeah.
just another illustration. There's a lot of smart people out
Right.
there
I had a
figuring out
friend-
new ways of doing things.
Yeah. I had a friend who built something like that
Oh, yeah?
for himself. He wanted to have his own power, so he decided he was going to do solar thermal, and he built a trough, and he had water going through that pipe. And when he saw how it performed, he decided he didn't want to do it.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because he couldn't control it. The water was going in and it was heating so fast that it was just blowing steam, you know, without...
It was too efficient for him, huh?
Yeah, it was too much for him. So he just said, well, I'm not going to do
It would
that.
seem that that could have been controlled real easily.
It could have been controlled, but he felt that that was beyond his engineering ability. So
I figured you could do it with a can of black paint.
you could do that, yes. That would work. But, you know, people have built batch-style... people have built batch-style water heaters and things like that for a long
I'm
time.
sure they've done it for a long, long time, yeah. Well, I told you last week, did I have a picture of it? 1878, they're selling a solar hot water heater in a magazine. Maybe I didn't bring it up. It was just an ad.
Yeah, I think that rings a bell. I think you showed me.
Yeah.
I don't know that we put
And it
it
looked
on
like the kind of thing people are putting up here in Vermont,
now.
homemade. That, you know, they
Yeah.
did it themselves,
Yeah,
just with pipes and
yeah.
all it was providing was hot water. But that may be, for many of us, the best way to go.
To have an 1860s style
Well, hot
solar.
water heater you make yourself out of parts you can buy in Brown and Roberts, and heat your hot water. Everybody uses hot water, and if you got enough of it, make it big enough, you can heat your house with it.
Well, that's true, and that was actually one of the things about the solarized Putney thing that we did recently. We did, that I was at recently. I didn't do it, but Daniel Hovis, who does DOS Solutions,
Yeah, I know
and he's
Dan.
the head of the Putney Energy Committee.
Yep.
Tad Montgomery was involved
Yep.
in that. Peter Thorell, who I'd mentioned
Okay.
from Sovereign. There was another solar PV company, and offhand I can't remember who it was, but there was also a solar. I'm not good with names, so there were two people there from different companies that were trying to do a solarized Putney thing where they could get a lot of people in one community to buy a whole bunch of installations simultaneously, so that companies could come in and do a bunch of jobs all together and get
the
an
efficiency of that,
out of
yeah.
that, so they could reduce the prices. And one of the companies that was there was Solar Thermal. And Solar Thermal is, you know, he was saying if you've got a house that it's suitable for, you can heat your house with Solar Thermal.
That's what I think I just said.
I think that's what you just said. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Not only are you right, but you're right you are right on enough with that it is something that people are actually doing.
Oh, I'm sure they
commercially.
are. I'm sure they are.
So, you know, but he said that in order to be viable, you had to have a good thermal mass. That's a trick for some people. It means that you have to get a whole bunch of drums and put them in your basement.
That's one way of doing it. Yeah. Yeah, another way is have concrete floors with pipes buried in the concrete.
Yeah.
And there's your solar mass right there.
Right. It's hard to do as a retrofit, though.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
When I was a young kid, my cousins lived in Levittown, Long Island.
Yeah.
And it was right after Levittown was first made, and all the houses looked alike and everything like that. But that's how they were heated.
Yeah.
They had pipes buried in a concrete floor.
Yeah.
You know, they had
And it
a
works
linoleum
very
on
well.
top of it.
Works very well.
It was very nice. You
Yeah.
know, it was
It's efficient.
comfortable in there. The floors were warm. You could walk around barefoot. And,
Yeah, one of the things that I suffer from when I get cold first is my feet, and I think a lot of people do that too.
yeah, yeah.
It's been my fate ever since I got frostbite.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And your feet. Wow.
Got frostbite
Yeah.
on my feet, and it's I don't remember having that problem before the frostbite, but
Got
I did.
another thing here I'd like to show up too.
My toes.
We were
turned purple.
talking about.
They were very unpleasant looking.
I bet.
Yeah.
We were talking about again different ways of storing. In this particular case, they're storing liquid air.
Liquid air, don't you love it? At what temperature?
They're cooling the air to minus 320.8 degrees Fahrenheit.
Now that's cold.
It's cold.
Yeah.
Turning roughly 185 gallons of air into 0.26, a quarter of a gallon of liquid air that's then stored in an insulation tank. And that's what you're looking at there. That blue thing is a
That
tank.
blue thing looks gigantic. There's
The
a
energy
quart-
is readily available when needed. To use it, simply open the tap. The liquid turns back into a gas, expands in volume, and drives a turbine.
So this is like using ambient heat to heat a steam engine, a steam turbine, instead of putting a fire under a big boiler.
Yeah, I mean, you just run it at a much lower temperature.
You're
But
running
yeah,
at a
you're
much
doing the
lower-
same
but
thing.
you're doing it with ambient heat.
You're boiling a liquid
yeah,
and
that-
using the gas to run a turbine.
Yeah, in this case, but that picture makes that storage thing look huge. I wonder how big that actually is.
I would say, looking at some of the things that I can recognize by size, that's probably about 5 feet around. You can see there's a stairway in the back.
Yeah. So this is being.
There's electrical
It would be nice
boxes
to know
there.
exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Because that, you know, they're talking about a quart of liquid, and does it really require something that big to deal with a quart of liquid?
No, that was just to give you the reference.
Okay.
There's a lot more than a quart in there.
Okay.
No.
Well, I knew that there were people who are doing this in the UK. Another thing that you can do, which is a little bit less, there's a little less demand because you don't have to go quite as cold, is to cool the air until I think it's the nitrogen drops out at a certain temperature, and the oxygen drops out at a lower temperature. And so
You can work with the nitrogen instead.
you can work with just
Yeah.
the nitrogen.
So you don't have to get as cold.
Yeah. And that means that you have oxygen as a byproduct. I don't know what you do with oxygen. it's a terrible thing to release oxygen into the environment. But the nitrogen that boils off, again, it's just being released into the environment. But that's where it came from. And they've been doing that as a different experiment.
And what they're saying here is it uses cheap off-peak energy to cool the air. So they're cooling it when the power is cheap or somebody's even paying them to take it.
Well, basically, that's what you're doing when you're running a battery too. You're taking.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're going to have grid battery, of course, as a homeowner, we don't think about cheap, expensive power because for most of it all comes in at the same rate. But if we had a smart grid and we were being charged for power at something that was related to the grid rate, our highest power prices would be in the afternoon.
Yep.
And our lowest prices would be like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We could have batteries that we could have our computers say charge that battery when the price of power goes below a certain amount.
Oh, absolutely.
And but that would be exactly the same kind of thing. It would be buy the power when it's cheap, and then have it for use or sell it back when
it's expensive.
When it's expensive. And so whether it's a train that goes up a hill and rolls back down again, or liquid air being stored, or a lead acid battery.
An array of lead acid batteries.
Right. It's all basically and every one of those devices is going to be having some level of inefficiency. So you're not going to get as much power out of it as you put in.
But who cares?
Well, that's the point, and people really have to understand that. If you can buy power at, we've mentioned
buy low, sell high.
If you can buy power at negative 10 cents a kilowatt hour, which is an extremely low price, but it has been achieved at wholesale prices, and then sell it at wholesale prices of $1 a kilowatt hour, which also, the folks at Green Mountain Power were talking about how they were hitting 60 cent per kilowatt hour wholesale prices at one point in Vermont this winter, but 60 cent prices. A kilowatt hour, you're making money when you use it to charge your battery. You're making money when you sell it back. So if you lose 10% of it, it doesn't matter. No. You're making money both ways.
Yeah.
And that's part of the whole thing. Usually the way the grid works, you're going to buy the power at 2 cents a kilowatt hour or 3 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that, and then sell it back at 15 cents. But even so, that's a good change. What have you got there?
One of my last pictures, as you have already mentioned at different times, they're building a lot of power in India and Pakistan.
Right.
And rightfully so. I mean, these people haven't had power in most of their countries, and they're enormous countries.
A third of the people in India have not had, at least a couple of years ago, a third of the people in India didn't have electric power.
So both of these countries are on building booms with solar and with, in this particular case, it's hydro. This particular state, now it looks to me like desert, but there's a river there, and apparently they plan on building a dam there.
Ah. Well, they've got places where rivers go through deserts because the rivers are coming down from mountains.
From mountains, yeah. And there's a lot of mountains in India.
Yeah, I guess
and
there
between
are.
India and Pakistan.
Yeah, the area of Kashmir. There are some people here in Brattleboro who came from there, and I was asking them, I said, "Are you from India?" And the fellow said, "Oh, yes." And I said, "Well, how does the cold weather of Vermont seem to you?" And he said, "Oh, nowhere near as cold as home." That's where we came from.
Yeah, so they came from the high mountains. Huh?
Now home is Brattleboro. Nowhere near as cold as where we came from, because they came from an area of Kashmir where the temperatures were lower.
Yeah.
And by the way, that area, one of the real reasons, I'm told by a person who came from Kashmir, the real reason why India and Pakistan are arguing over Kashmir is not because of the people who live there so much as because of the resources that the area has, which are very large resources in hydropower. There's a lot of
hydropower resources.
Yes,
okay.
in Kashmir.
Interesting.
And this river that we just saw might be flowing from that area or from Tibet. or from some other area like mountains in Afghanistan or along the border of Pakistan. But, you know.
Here's another one, and this is germane to Brattleboro.
Yes?
This is in Georgia, and that's a landfill.
Yes.
And it's near Atlanta. I guess it's Atlanta's garbage or part of Atlanta's garbage. They've been
Right.
building it for years. That's a big pyramid that they built of garbage. And they have just recently put up solar panels all over the two corners that face in the right direction.
Right.
The green stuff you see there is some kind of tarp that they built, that they put down
They might
over
be-
the landfill for.
They might be catching methane with that.
It didn't say that in the article. It didn't. So I don't know about that. But below this, it's not in this picture. There's a large pond.
Okay.
Looks like a collecting pond, so it's probably water pours. I can't imagine it's a recreational lake. They wouldn't put one next to a dump. So it's probably something like that. But the reason I mention it is we have a landfill.
Yes.
You can't grow anything on it. It's not going to be farmland.
Yes.
I think it'd be an excellent idea to start looking at that as
Well,
a solar farm.
we are looking at that landfill as a solar farm.
We got to. I mean, it's
There's
the highest
no
and best
question.
purpose
And in
for
fact, the changes in the net metering law, there's a Windham County exemption.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, and this is something which basically completely alters the situation for a Brattleboro solar array, and that landfill could have several megawatts of solar put into it.
I'm sure.
You know, they have.
Offhand, I don't have any idea how big it is, but
Well, they have. I went down to Greenfield, Massachusetts, and there was the landfill there with a 3 megawatt array. And
3 on okay.
on a landfill, they took up just a small part of the landfill. Part of the problem that we've had in the past is that these landfills are limited as to, and solar farms in general, are limited as to size in Vermont, or have been in the past. And which is one of the reasons why if you go to I forget the name of the website, but there's a website that you can get a list of all of the wind farms that are part of the program. And if you ask what's the biggest wind farm in Vermont, you're going to get an answer, and it's 2.2 megawatts. But there's probably 10 or more wind farms that are of that size.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Wind farms or solar?
solar farms
Yeah, okay.
that are of that size. And if you look at Massachusetts, putting solar arrays on landfills, everybody is trying to get a solar array on their landfill.
Well, why not? Like I said, it's the highest and best use for it. You can't
Yeah.
do much else on it.
You can't do much else. The land shifts too much to build buildings on.
Mm-hmm.
It has toxins in it, so you can't put animals on it. You can't
Mm-hmm.
farm on it. By the time you can't make it into a park unless you do some really fancy
Really?
stuff. Ultimately the solar farm is a way of getting power out of it and getting money out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the wind farm on the solar array, on the landfill at Greenfield is not providing a lot of money to the community. What it is providing is electricity at a cost of 1 cent per kilowatt hour.
1 cent.
1 cent.
How are they pulling that one off?
I don't remember the details of that, but the people who developed the thing, and it's not all of the output is going to the town of Greenfield. It's
Is it privately owned or is it owned by the town?
I don't remember.
Because there's various financial arrangements
Yes.
that sometimes favor privately owned because there's tax credits,
Yep.
and sometimes favor municipally owned, especially if they can use the power themselves.
Yes, and actually, a privately owned thing can get federal tax credits or federal.
That's what I was
Stuff.
referring to. Yeah, tax credits particularly.
Okay, that's what you were talking about. Yes, of course. I should have put two and two together and
Yeah.
not come up with 4 1/4.
Some kind of public-private partnership seems to work.
Well, I think a public-private partnership would probably be a good way to do things. And, you know, you can get revenue out of these things. And it's
Oh, absolutely.
one of the reasons why, I did that motion at the town meeting was exactly that. I want to reduce taxes in Brattleboro, and I think it should be done everywhere it can possibly be done.
I'm with you. Why don't we take a couple of minutes for you to talk about that? Somebody watching it might be interested.
Yeah, they might be, but you know what? I'll promise that we can talk about this in greater detail. We've only got about 3 or 4
3
minutes
minutes or
before
something
we
like
get
that.
to,
Yeah.
Yeah,
You couldn't talk about it in 3
I
minutes.
couldn't talk about it, but basically what I did was I introduced a motion to form a committee to investigate the idea of having a town electric resource organized as possibly as a town-owned utility, possibly as a co-op that the town could own a share of, possibly as a B Corp. But the purpose of it would be to provide the town with a source of revenue, but it would also be to prevent $24 million a year that we're spending on electricity from being moved out of our economy as it is every year.
Is that what we're spending now? 24?
Yeah, and if we could keep that
That's
money,
a significant amount of money.
yeah, it's more than I would spend in a week. So
At least, yeah.
I mean, I'm fairly frugal, but even so, I think it would take me more than a few days to spend $24 million. That is the equivalent of $20 every second, roughly. If you think about $20 going down a tube and being blown out of sight by whatever forces there are down there that suck it away.
And you know what?
What?
That price is going to go up.
That price is going to go up, but if we have our own renewable power sources, and what I think we should do is have each of the substations in Brattleboro, the core be the core of a microgrid that can detach itself from the grid and have it continue to have power.
Well, that makes sense. Although there's 2 of them that are in close proximity to each other in South Brattleboro, both near Cotton Mill Hill.
Okay.
One of them's a pretty big substation. It's fed by some fairly high voltage cables or
Right.
transmission lines.
Okay.
The other one is small, much older, I'm sure, and it's designed to feed into the local neighborhood.
Well, I don't know how the grid would be broken up, but I'd like to see it broken up into the local grid.
Well, there's land down there. There's commercial land down there. Some of it's owned by the town or by the development authority there.
Right. And some of that land could be used for the development of biomass.
I guess that's kind of what I'm
generators.
thinking.
And then, I talked to John Allen, who's one of the select board members, after the town meeting, and he said to me, he didn't like the idea of the solar arrays because they're ugly. And I said, but we don't have to have solar arrays. We could give people an incentive to put solar power on their roofs and put it on the grid.
Yeah.
And there are many, many, many different ways of tackling this. But it would give us resilience. We talked earlier about the grid going down for a year or 2 or 3 or 4. This would mean that if the grid went down, we could keep going. And we would, what I'd like to see would be Brattleboro broken up by substations so that we'd have 2 or 3 microgrids, and then that each could have its own generating capacity and each continue with the grid down. Then have secondarily a tie between the two so that
they could feed power to each other.
Power to each other as needed, which could then be extended to other communities like Marlboro and Vernon and Guilford and so forth around us, so that basically we could build a situation where we could have biomass and solar, possibly Marlboro could have solar and wind, and when you start having different resources, the 2 of us, Brattleboro and Marlboro, could share hydro
The
resource.
hydro resource along Route 9.
And and that resource, I don't know how big that could be, but James Perkins told me that he would come with numbers.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it might be interesting to see what that's going to be.
Well, I'm
And-
thinking Vernon Road, boy, there's just sitting by the side of the road, there's probably enough biomass there to last us 10 years.
Yeah, right. Well, all of this, I think Vermont could be 100% renewable and 100% its own supply. $1 billion kept in our economy that is now flowing out, that we have to replace every year by luring people into the state. And we've got lots of good lures, but why are we shipping money out of the state if we can have it in state?
Because
It would
that's
give
the
us
way it's
jobs.
always been done.
That's right. It would give
And
us
that's the only
jobs.
reason.
I don't know how many jobs, but my guess is that it would be well over 10,000 in the state, probably over 20,000. But even
Well, if you're
locally,
talking about gleaning wood out of the forests, that's all local stuff. That's local
right.
guys with
It's local
chainsaws
guys,
and
exactly.
skidders doing it
yeah,
on their own.
exactly.
Local contractors. It ain't going to be
Exactly.
big business.
Exactly. And the in Brattleboro, how many people are going to be employed by a $24 million a year business? Just the fact that you'd be having a $24 million a year business acting as a local electric generation source means that you'd have that. How many people? It might be 24 people.
At least half that.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, you've got subsidiary organizations that could come along. For example, if you're doing biomass as wood and you're doing wood gasification, you can take charcoal out of that
And sell that.
and
Biochar.
sell that and have biochar. And by the time you're done with this, you can have multiple industries, chemical industries that are non-polluting chemical industries and electrical utilities, but biochar. Biochar is something people use in their gardens. And it's all of that could be done. And it would cut our taxes, it would increase our employment, and it would be, I think, beneficial to our environment.
We
So-
could probably get together a little round table here on this show
Oh yeah.
and talk about that for the whole hour.
Oh, we could go for a whole day, I think.
Yeah.
But by the way, we have ended. We've gone past our second hour, so maybe it's
I think
time
it's about time to wrap up.
to wrap up. Yeah. So, ladies and gentlemen, please come back.